Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. Microsoft just told millions of people their perfectly good computers are trash. Windows 11 refuses to install on hardware that could easily run it, displaying the brutal message, this PC can't run Windows 11 to anyone with a machine older than a few years. Today, we're diving into how a free tool called Rufus is giving Microsoft the middle finger, letting you install Windows 11 on basically any computer that can boot up. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly how to bypass these arbitrary restrictions and what this rebellion against big tech really means. So let me hand this over to someone who's actually wrestled with these installation nightmares. What's really going on with Windows 11's hardware requirements?
Microsoft basically went from the anything goes approach of Windows 10 to this super rigid system with Windows 11. According to the page content, Windows 11 requires UEFI firmware, secure boot, TPM2, specific processor generations, and a bunch of other stuff that older but perfectly capable machines just don't have.
Wait, so they literally made it harder to install their own operating system?
Exactly. And here's the kicker. The page content mentions that Windows 11 hardware requirements made so many people angry that they left Windows behind for good once Windows 10 was officially declared dead. We're talking about a mass exodus because of artificial barriers.
That's insane. So what exactly is this TPM thing that's causing all the drama?
TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module. It's basically a security chip. Microsoft says it's non-negotiable for Windows 11, but here's the thing. Tons of computers that could run Windows 11 perfectly fine just don't have TPM2. It's like requiring a specific brand of key to enter a house that any key could unlock.
And that's where Rufus comes in?
Rufus is this free open source tool that's been around for years, originally designed to create bootable USB drives. But the developers added something brilliant, the ability to create Windows 11 installers that just ignore Microsoft's hardware checks entirely.
Okay, but how does it actually work? Is this like old school Windows cracking?
Not at all. This is the fascinating part. According to the Make Use Of article, Rufus doesn't change how Windows functions or modify the operating system itself. You still get a full, legitimate version of Windows 11. Instead, it modifies the installation package.
So it's like sneaking past the bouncer instead of breaking into the club?
Perfect analogy. Rufus basically disables the compatibility checks built into the Windows installer. There's this file called appraiserres.dll that verifies whether your PC meets Microsoft's requirements during setup. Rufus either replaces or neutralizes this file so the checks simply don't run.
That's actually pretty clever. What else can it bypass?
According to the page content, when you create a Windows 11 USB installer with Rufus, you can remove TPM2, secure boot, RAM, and CPU checks. It can also inject registry entries that tell the installer to bypass all these validations automatically.
So instead of manually typing commands during installation, Rufus just does it all for you?
Exactly. Normally you'd have to manually add registry entries using command prompt during setup, but Rufus automates the entire process. It's like having a tech-savvy friend do all the complicated stuff while you just click next.
All right, so let's get practical. How do you actually use this thing?
First, you need to download Rufus. It's available from Microsoft Store, GitHub, or the official website. The page content recommends getting the portable version to avoid installation altogether. You'll also need a Windows 11 ISO file from Microsoft's official download page.
And then what? Just drag and drop?
Pretty much. You run Rufus, select your USB drive, needs to be at least 8 GB, then select your Windows 11 ISO file. Here's the cool part. The bypass options don't appear until you hit the Start button. That's when Rufus shows you all the restrictions you can remove.
What kind of restrictions are we talking about?
According to the page content, you can remove requirements for 4 GB plus RAM, secure boot, TPM2, and even the Microsoft account sign-in requirement. Plus, it can disable data collection and skip those privacy questions that pop up during setup.
Wait, it can skip the Microsoft account requirement too? That's huge.
Right? Microsoft really wants you logged into their ecosystem, but Rufus lets you create a local account instead. It's like getting back the Windows experience from before everything became a subscription service.
Now I'm curious about alternatives. Is Rufus the only game in town?
There are other tools mentioned in the page content. Microsoft's own media creation tool is the official method, but it doesn't bypass any restrictions. There's also Ventoy, which lets you put multiple ISO files on one USB drive, but it doesn't have Rufus's bypass capabilities.
So what's the difference between using Microsoft's tool versus Rufus?
The media creation tool is simpler. It downloads and creates a bootable USB in one step. but according to the page content, it only works if your hardware already meets Windows 11 requirements. Rufus gives you control and lets you work around those restrictions.
The whole Windows 10 retirement situation reminds me of when they tried to kill Internet Explorer. People just refused to let go of what worked for them.
That's such a good point. And the page content mentions that Windows 10 officially retired on October 14, 2025, but millions of users are still choosing it for stability and hardware compatibility. There's even an extended security updates program to keep systems safe until 2028.
So people are literally paying extra to avoid upgrading to Windows 11?
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The page content shows someone successfully installed Windows 11 on a 10-year-old PC using Rufus. That's hardware that Microsoft would officially reject, running their latest OS without any issues.
That really highlights how arbitrary these restrictions are, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The fact that Microsoft made Windows 11 so restrictive that people need workarounds just to install it on perfectly capable hardware shows how disconnected they are from real-world usage. It's like designing a car that only runs on premium gas when regular would work fine.
And there are no downsides to using Rufus? No performance hits or missing features?
According to the page content, you still end up with a full version of Windows 11 without any modifications. Rufus doesn't actually crack Windows, it's more like teaching the installer to look the other way during hardware checks, which is completely different from old-school piracy.
It's fascinating how Rufus started as a simple PowerShell script and evolved into this sophisticated tool that can outsmart Microsoft's own installer.
The page content mentions it was created by a developer who spent years in IT support, so they understood exactly what pain points needed solving. It's grown from a basic script into a full desktop application with a clean interface that works on both Windows 10 and 11.
What about other creative solutions? I saw something about Windows to Go in the page content.
Windows to Go is actually pretty cool. It lets you run Windows 11 entirely from a USB drive. You need a USB 3 to SATA adapter and an SSD, but then you can boot Windows 11 on any computer without installing it to the hard drive. It bypasses hardware requirements because it's not technically installing on the system.
So you could carry Windows 11 in your pocket and run it on any computer?
Exactly. Though the page content warns that slower devices and interfaces aren't recommended. You want USB 3 and an SSD for decent performance. But yeah, it's like having a portable computer that works on any hardware.
This whole situation really makes you think about who actually owns your computer, doesn't it?
That's the deeper issue here. Microsoft is essentially deciding what hardware is good enough for their software, even when that hardware can clearly run it. Tools like Rufus are pushing back against that control.
And it's not just about old computers, right? Even some newer machines get caught in these restrictions?
Absolutely. The page content mentions that many computers powerful enough to run Windows 11 still can't install it because of these specific requirements. It's not about performance, it's about having the exact right combination of features that Microsoft demands.
So what's the real-world impact here? Are we talking about millions of computers that could get a second life?
The environmental impact alone is huge. Instead of forcing people to buy new hardware or throw away perfectly good computers, tools like Rufus let people extend the life of their existing machines. It's like digital recycling.
And from a practical standpoint, what should people actually do if they're in this situation?
If you have a computer that can't officially run Windows 11 but you need to upgrade, Rufus is probably your best bet. The page content shows it's reliable, free, and gives you a legitimate Windows installation. Just make sure to back up your data first.
Any warnings or things people should watch out for?
The main thing is understanding that you're bypassing Microsoft's official requirements. While the installation works fine, you might not get the same level of support if something goes wrong. But for most people, that's a reasonable trade-off.
What about updates? Will Windows Update still work normally?
According to the page content, you get a full version of Windows 11, so updates should work normally. The bypass only affects the initial installation process, not the ongoing operation of the system.
This really feels like a David versus Goliath story, doesn't it? Small developers creating tools that give users back control over their own hardware.
It's a perfect example of how the open source community responds when big tech companies make decisions that don't serve users' actual needs. Rufus exists because Microsoft created a problem that needed solving.
And it's completely legal, right? We're not talking about piracy or anything shady.
The page content is very clear about this. It's not the same as cracking Windows like in the old days with stolen installations and keygens. You're still using a legitimate Windows license and getting official software. You're just bypassing arbitrary installation restrictions.
So when you step back from all this technical detail, what's the bigger picture here?
This is really about user agency versus corporate control. Microsoft wants to dictate how and where you can use their software, but tools like Rufus prove that users don't have to accept those limitations. It's digital civil disobedience.
And for anyone listening who's dealing with an unsupported computer, they now know there's a way forward that doesn't involve buying new hardware or abandoning Windows entirely.
Exactly. The page content shows real people successfully installing Windows 11 on decade-old hardware. It's proof that these restrictions are artificial, not technical limitations.
Here's what I find most interesting. Microsoft created these barriers, but the community immediately found ways around them. It's like they're playing chess while users are playing 4D chess.
And the tools keep getting better. Rufus has evolved from basic USB creation to this sophisticated bypass system. Meanwhile, Microsoft keeps tightening restrictions, creating this ongoing cat and mouse game.
So what's next? Will Microsoft try to block these workarounds?
They could try, but it would be like playing whack-a-mole. The open source community is pretty resourceful, and as long as there's demand for these tools, people will keep developing them. Plus, blocking them might create even more backlash.
The fact that we even need to have this conversation shows how far we've come from the days when you could just install software on any computer that could run it.
It's a reminder that in the digital age, owning hardware doesn't necessarily mean controlling it. But tools like Rufus help restore some of that control to users who want it.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Copilot Podcasts. Remember, your computer isn't obsolete just because Microsoft says it is. Sometimes the best solutions come from developers who actually understand what users need, not what corporations want to sell them. Thanks for listening, and keep questioning those artificial